Your words create your world. As someone who's been studying neurolinguistics for close to 2 decades, I deeply appreciate language. I appreciate and see its power and the effect it can have on one's life when we are using language intentionally versus unintentionally. Recently, I was working with a coaching client who was experiencing some anxiety in a new relationship, and they said to me, "I'm just an anxious person in relationship, Clayton." Now, that statement almost slipped by me. I mean, it very well could be true from their perspective, couldn't it? However, as a coach, part of my work, part of my role working with clients is to pay close attention to the language that they use to create their experience. Because oftentimes, how you talk about things determine what you experience. Now, let's pause for a moment because most people operate in life thinking the exact opposite is true. First, there's an event that happens out there. And then there is the language that we drum up to describe that experience. However, if we try on for a moment that it's actually the reverse, that how we speak about an issue is what largely determines our experience of it, we suddenly access a tremendous amount of power. When we describe what's going on in our lives, our problems, our experiences, the people that we encounter, we're not actually describing what's out there. Our language is being used to create how we experience what's out there. So, for example, back to my client, they say, "I'm just an anxious person in a relationship." When we look at that statement through the new lens of us creating our experience through language, that's quite a declaration to make about oneself. It's damning, it's self-limiting, and there isn't much room for that person to feel anything other than anxious when the connection gets real, as they have just declared that is who they are when they're in relationship, an anxious person. So if language creates our experience rather than describes it, you must learn to take greater responsibility for the words that come out of your mouth and the words you use inside of your mind when you speak about your life and especially yourself. Imagine language as the code, the building blocks of our reality that we step into. What we speak into existence. What we say, we start to see. And when we can name something, it comes into being for us, and we begin to conceptualize it, we begin to better understand it, and then we suddenly have a relationship with it. So take this into what happened with my client. So I helped them find more freedom in the experience through this conversation. It began with the statement, "I'm just an anxious person in a relationship." And I said, "In every relationship, you're anxious?" They said, "No, well, not every relationship, mainly romantic relationships." I said, "Okay, thank you. And are you always anxious when you're in romantic relationships?" I said, "No, sometimes I get anxious when they pull away." I said, "Okay, so a more accurate statement might be, sometimes I feel anxious when I perceive that my partner is pulling away." And they said, "Yeah, that's right." So notice we've got two very different statements now with two very different feelings and implications, and I want you to feel the difference between these two. So the first one, "I'm just an anxious person in a relationship," versus, "Sometimes I get anxious in a relationship when I think my partner is pulling away." There's a very different gravity to each of these. Now, for my client, the first statement, it carried far more shame and a belief that there was something fundamentally wrong with them because they're anxious all the time. And the second was much more normalizing and accurate to what they really thought when we got to digging. And it allows for them to also be more than anxious in the relationship. The key words are sometimes and when I think. These are important to note because they limit the context to the anxiety that my client felt. They turn an emotion that feels at first eclipsing into something that is containable and manageable. And there's also another modification that we can make for some bonus points by adding "up until now," from "up until now I've been." This statement recognizes that in the past, the anxiety may have been true, but it leaves room for something new to happen in the present and going forward. So if we were to add this in, it'd be, "Up until now, I have sometimes been anxious in a relationship when I think my partner is pulling away." So do you see that and do you feel the difference? How that opens up possibility? So in summary, through recreating this anxious experience with intentional language, we've, number one, put it in the past with language like, "I have been sometimes." Two, we leave room for a new experience now and into the future with the statement "up until now." And three, We've eliminated it as an all-encompassing feeling by using sometimes when I think my partner is pulling away. And lastly, we've identified it as one interpretation and not the truth, illustrated by the statement, when I think my partner is pulling away, when I think. So here's an invitation. If for the next week you were to take full responsibility for your language as an act of creation rather than description, how would this shift the words that you use? How would that impact the way that you talk about your problems or yourself? What if one major key to unlocking the life that you want is in simply shifting the way that you're creating your experience through language? I'd love for you to put a reply and let me know how this message lands in the comments below. And if you'd like to enter into a dialogue with me, you can also reach me in my email that I'll leave below in the description. People that choose to engage in a coaching relationship begin to master two fundamental skills when they work with me. The first one is to ask more powerful questions about others and yourself. And you also learn to use language in a way that creates the reality you want rather than curses you to live under past limitation and past trauma. So if you're feeling particularly challenged, or if you're wanting to create more love, trust, and aliveness in your life or relationships, we can simply have a dialogue and see if there's a fit. So again, send me an email. It's below in the description and we'll go from there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.